spread across 3 racks in the data center. Any one of those racks could lose network connectivity or power, which takes out a whole chunk of the cluster. On the other end of the scale, each of those data nodes has 12 spinning disks, and any one disk could fail, causing a loss of storage. Hadoop has coping mechanisms built in for different types of failure. The aim is to preserve the integrity of the cluster, to make sure it can still function in the face of a failed component, and the mechanisms are different for different severities of failure. Let's start by looking at the loss of one whole server. Say the motherboard gets fried and the server goes offline. If this is a worker node, then that means we lose some of the compute capacity, which is a low impact loss. It just means queries will take longer to run, because there are fewer cores available to run tasks. Any tasks which were in process on that node will be rescheduled. There's a heartbeat mechanism between tasks and the application master, so if tasks stop responding, the application master will schedule them on a different node. And there's a heartbeat mechanism between the application master and the resource manager, so if the worker which goes down is running an application master process, the resource manager will reschedule the application master on a new node and the job will continue running. But loss of a worker node also means loss of storage redundancy. That server is offline, so all the file blocks that were replicated on that node now only have 2 replicas instead of 3. Hadoop can't assume that the data is still safe, or that the node will soon come back online with all its data intact. And with only 2 replicas, those blocks are now vulnerable. If another node fails, then we could have some file blocks with a single copy. So to prevent that, Hadoop has regular heartbeats from the data nodes to the name node. If the heartbeats stop, then the name node assumes that data node is lost, and then it commissions other nodes to make replicas of the file blocks which were on the lost node. When the replica is complete, all files will be back up to the expected replication factor, and the cluster is back to normal redundancy. If just one disk on a worker fails, then by default, Hadoop assumes the worst and takes the node out of the cluster. So the response is the same as if the whole server went down. That's configurable though, so if you're happy with the risk, you can specify the servers should keep running with a certain number of disk failures. If the server that goes down is the master node, then that's more significant. The master runs the yarn resource manager process, so without it, no more work can be scheduled. And worse, the master runs the HDFS name node, and without that, none of the data can be accessed at all. In an average Hadoop cluster, there's a secondary master, which runs a passive name node and resource manager. The secondary keeps the same state as the primary, but there's no automatic failover. So if you lose the primary, your cluster will be unavailable for storage or compute until you manually switch to the secondary and it comes online. You can run Hadoop in a high availability setup with multiple active masters, but for that you need a coordination service like Zookeeper, which itself needs multiple servers, so it's not a trivial setup. Even deploying a small multi-node cluster is not a simple task, and in the next module we'll look at packaged Hadoop distributions that make it much easier. But before we move on, I'll recap what I've covered in this module. We've learned that Hadoop is a platform for storing and processing huge amounts of data. The storage part is provided by HDFS, the Hadoop Distributed File System, and the compute part is provided by Yarn, yet another